Welcome to the Real News Network, coming to you from our studio in Washington, D.C. Last week, President Obama released memoranda from President Bush's legal counsel that said it was okay to use waterboarding and other extraordinary interrogation methods. Well, after World War II, Japanese soldiers were charged for doing exactly that. Here's Jon Stewart's take on the controversy.
Of course, we caught those torturing Japanese soldiers and gave them sentences ranging from long prison terms to the loss of their heads. We killed them. But on this past Sunday and Monday, the Obama administration made it very clear that they had no such plans.
He believes that people in good faith were operating with the guidance they were provided. They shouldn't be
prosecuted. But what about those who devised the policy?
Yeah, but those who devised the policy, he believes that they were should not be prosecuted either.
Why not the Bush administration lawyers? Why are they not being held accountable?
The president is focused on looking forward. That's why.
He's looking forward! But unfortunately, on Tuesday, Obama may have peeked over his shoulder.
With respect to those who formulated those legal decisions, I would say that that is going to be more of a decision for the Attorney General.
What you talking about, Obama?
So to help us get to the bottom of these issues, I'm now joined by Bruce Fein. He's the founder of American Freedom Agenda that says it works to restore constitutional checks and balances. He served in the U.S. Justice Department under President Reagan, and he's the author of the book Constitutional Peril, and he works for Ron Paul's Campaign for Liberty. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what do you make of the argument that everybody was acting in good faith, there was a threat?
Well, that doesn't justify violating the law. That's in a more extreme circumstance called following orders defense. It wasn't accepted in post-World War II Nuremberg. It wasn't accepted when Adolf Eichmann was prosecuted. I'm not trying to suggest we're at that level. But the fact is, we don't know all of the facts at present. We just got some of these memoranda. It had to come upon by a lawsuit. It wasn't something that Obama released voluntarily. And certainly the precedents are that waterboarding is torture. The Attorney General has said that. Waterboarding, which creates an imminent fear of death, is said in the statute that's in the United States Code, is torture. And there is no exception in our torture law that says if you're acting in a national security situation, you can commit torture. Now, why is that? Even if we thought torture worked, and that's highly dubious. We don't do that for the same reason we don't do the rack and the screw, because it tells something about us. We don't want to be savages. Even if it needs to be savagery to win, we'd rather die than reduce ourselves to animals. And this idea that all means the ends justify the means, and there isn't really much to substantiate Dick Cheney and other assertions that the torture produced all this time-sensitive material. Because if it were, Paul, why did they stop? Why isn't Dick Cheney and George Bush saying, we need to have more of the waterboarding and torture because it saves so many lives? And that Mr. Obama is doing a despicable thing by exposing us to these additional terrorist attacks because he's not torturing people. They aren't saying that, which is they really believed that what they were doing was so effective, they would have never stopped whatsoever.
Now, the question is, if this is illegal, and the Attorney General, during his hearings to be confirmed, said waterboarding is torture, it's illegal. Is it really, how is there even a choice here? President Bush and Vice President Cheney admitted on television that they authorized waterboarding. If the lawyers that told them it was legal were violating the Constitution, why is there even a choice here?
Well, remember, you've omitted a very important clause of the Constitution. It's the Take Care Clause. Article 2 of the Constitution says the President is saddled with an obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Faithfully executed, not sabotaged or ignored, faithfully executed. And you've described a situation where we have the former president, former vice president saying, we authorized waterboarding. We have the president's attorney general saying, waterboarding is torture, which is a crime. There are no national security exceptions for torture whatsoever. Then the president is obliged to faithfully enforce the law, or he has an option. If he thinks there are mitigating circumstances, he can issue a pardon. That's what the pardon power is for. But it means the president has to take the political heat, like President Ford took the heat for pardoning Nixon. He can do that. If he thinks there's extenuating circumstances, yes. That's why you have the pardon power, Mr. President, not to just ignore it and duck being cowardly to be careful about it, to be candid about it, and saying, well, we just want it to go away and pretend it didn't happen.
Okay, now he says he's now said it's up to the Attorney General.
No, he's not said. He says only with regard to whether or not those who gave legal advice, that is, whether the underlings might be prosecuted. He still hasn't said it's up to the Attorney General to decide on Cheney or Bush or Condi Rice or Don Rumsfeld or anybody else, the higher-ups, the ones who are responsible for the policy. He's not said that. He's only said, well, the lower down people who aren't going to create what you might call disruption of the Toscanini Symphony at the top, those are the people you might decide. But remember, in some sense, the president can't get away from his obligation anyway under the Constitution. He can't tell, for example, the Secretary of Defense, you decide whether to invade Iraq. I don't want to decide that. Tell the Director of National Intelligence, you decide whether we're going to do a violation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. No. The president is elected because he's supposed to make those tough decisions. So the fact that he may say, I'll leave it up to the Attorney General, is really simply a way to dodge what is his responsibility to decide for himself, because he's going to be held responsible for whatever the Attorney General decides, because he's the one who nominated him. He can remove him at any time.
Now, the argument they're going to give, obviously, is that we're in such an economic crisis, in terms of the geopolitics, the Afghan war, the problems of Iraq. It doesn't serve the country well to dig into the past. Let's just move forward and change the policies in a positive way. What's wrong with that argument?
The mission of any government official, including me when I served in the government for long years, was to faithfully uphold and defend the Constitution and the rule of law of the United States. When I took an oath, and when Obama took an oath, it did nothing about economic policy, said nothing about other than the procedures and the process are what the mission of the United States is about. The other things are all secondary. It doesn't matter whether they have a great booming economy if we then have no longer rule of law and we have one person above the law who sits in the White House. That's not the United States I was born into. It's not the United States I want to stay around with. And it's not the United States that he has an oath to uphold and defend. Moreover, this rather amateurish sophomoric statement, we just want to be forward-looking. Well, Paul, all criminal law is backward-looking. We don't prosecute people for things that haven't happened. And if he really meant that, he'd ignore 9/11. 9/11 is looking backward, Osama bin Laden's ancient history, and forget about it. And he's got thousands of troops where? In Afghanistan, because he's not forgetting 9/11. So this is not even a serious argument. And this is too important an issue when the rule of law is at stake, who we are as a country, what character we want to display to other countries of the world. We care about the rule of law. And we care that other countries recognize that we have character that distinguishes us.
Okay, so if you were an advisor to President Obama, what would you advise him to do now?
I would advise him to look at all of the circumstances and see if you really think that right after 9/11, the pressure cooker was so great and the uncertainty so great, you need to pardon them if you think that's true, and explain it to the American people why pardons are needed. Now, of course, when you issue pardons, they have to be accepted, Paul. When you accept the pardon, you're agreeing that you committed a violation of law. So it doesn't set a precedent like the current ignorance of the law is, that this is actually legal. You did, all right, you accepted it, you did wrong, they're not going to recur. That's what I would do. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the circumstances, because many of these continuation interrogation practices continued long after 9/11, where we weren't in that crisis atmosphere, you got to decide in 30 seconds, then I'd say, do we have to prosecute these people? At the very top. You don't go to the bottom, you go to the people who made the policy.
And what's the process then?
The process is very simple. You would take the statements of Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney, which they've openly acknowledged, say, we authorized waterboarding. You present that to a grand jury. This is how the Justice Department would present that issue to a grand jury and say, here's what the statute says. This is what the president has said. This is what the vice president said.
So it doesn't require a special prosecutor?
No, you don't need that at all. You don't need a special prosecutor to do this. This is what the obligation is of the ordinary Department of Justice every day of the week. And this runs like any other criminal prosecution. That's how the system's supposed to work. In some sense, the requirement of a special prosecutor indicates you don't have faith in the honesty and integrity of your own people.
So when Bush and Cheney went on television and admitted this, it was actually a tactic, I guess you could say, to make Obama have to take a position one way or the other. They kind of cornered him, and now that he blinked, I
think they knew he would blink. No, but these guys are not stupid. No one would go out and plead guilty to torture if they thought they were going to get prosecuted. That's just not how Washington works. And Bush and Cheney have very high-powered legal advisors around them. Any lawyer would say, you don't say that, you're conceding that you've committed a crime, unless you had assurances, whether it was expressed or otherwise, hey, they aren't going to go after you. He just wants to campaign on Toscanini-like noises throughout the congressional corridors. We don't want to hear any dissents. He's worried about the right-wing Republicans.
Now, Cheney and Rove have been on Fox the last few days, slamming Obama for even releasing the memoranda.
Yeah.
What do you make of what they've been saying?
Well, number one, they've said that at the same time they say he should release more memoranda, namely all the great success stories that are classified of all the things that were that were prevented because of the torture. Now, one of the things that I'll mention about his claim that he had great success in preventing all Americans from dying because he authorized the tortures, then I go back to what it is. Why then did you stop it? Mr. Vice President, why did you ever stop it? Why to the very last day were you insisting that the waterboarding continue? Not 283 times, but 500 and 1,000 times if it was so successful. Why did you do that? And moreover, he doesn't understand what the United States is about. It is self-government. We, the people, are sovereign. We have a right to know what's happening in our own government because the people have a right to tell the president, you can't commit torture, we're going to enact a law. If you do it, and if you practice it, we'll impeach you. You can only do that if you know what your government is doing. You can't have self-government with secrecy because the people have to decide whether they approve or don't approve. How can you prove something that you don't know what's going on? So we should have had those memoranda long ago. Why did Obama wait till a lawsuit was brought? He should have given them out right away. Because we get to decide. People say, well, but you maybe give an edge to the enemy. They will know some of our tactics. That's right, because we are not like the enemy. Even if they get a small edge, that's part of the price you take of being a democracy and making those moral judgments yourself. And I will pay that price, and other people, I think, would pay that price. We decide whether we want waterboarding, not somebody who isn't going to have their kids out there and captured and maybe waterboarded themselves. We are the ones whose character is shown by the practices we have. We get to decide because we're the people, the highest office in the land where all sovereignty resides. And this idea that, oh no, only the president decides this is wrong-headed. It inverts the conception of a republic. No, the highest office in the republic is us. Not the guy at the top. He's our echo. He is somebody who represents us. We can withdraw our consent anytime.
Thanks very much for joining us, Bruce. Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have a $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the Real News every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.